Week on Gamecock Game Day. Gamecock women's basketball takes their 9th SEC tournament championship as they gear up for March Madness. An all-new guest joins us on stage for another game of Around the Horseshoe. But first, the Gamecock men's basketball season has come to an abrupt end.
All that and more coming up.
Welcome back to Gamecock Game Day. I'm Zander Collins.
And I'm Austin McConnell. Picking up where we left off before spring break, Gamecock men's basketball dropped their last regular season game on March 8th against Tennessee. The Gamecocks were able to keep up with the Volunteers for the first part of the game, but things changed with a 14-5 run from the Volunteers, sealing the 75-65 loss.
The Gamecocks then moseyed on over to the Music City for the SEC tournament. Their first and only game of the tournament was last Wednesday against number 9 seed Arkansas. Despite the 72-68 loss, the Gamecocks did not go down without a fight. After trailing significantly at the start of the second half, a Razorback scoring drought allowed the Gamecocks to cut the lead to just 1 point with about 3 minutes left to play. The remainder of the game was tight until Jonelle Davis sealed the win for Arkansas with 2 free throws.
Colin Murray Boyles' career at South Carolina has likely come to an end, as many suspect he will head to the NBA draft next year. But he has certainly left his mark in Gamecock history. He ends the season with 12 20-point games and 9 double-doubles. He leads the SEC in field goal percentage this season with 58.6% for 198 out of 338. His career field goal percentage of 59% is the second most in South Carolina history.
I mean, it was a great season for Colin Murray Boyles. He was just named to the second team All-SEC. Didn't have a great game against Tennessee, though. It was kind of the first performance of the season where he didn't really show up very much at all. It was really Jamari Thomas and Nick Pringle that did the majority of the heavy lifting in that one, which is nice to see some different contributors, but it's also not great to see Colin Murray Boyles not play to his best, especially with the draft coming up, as we were mentioning. Only had 7 points and 3 rebounds, didn't really get to put his stamp on the game. Your thoughts, Austin?
Yeah, I think I give Nick Pringle a lot of harsh comments, I guess, when watching the games, because he really is just inconsistent, and we've talked about consistency all year. Don't want to give him his flowers.
14 rebounds too, that's a double-double.
Yeah, good for him. And then I want to talk about Jamari Thomas. The growth he has had this season has been great. At the beginning of the year, he looked fine against the non-conference opponents, the lesser competitive ones, but when we got to the SEC, he just looked overwhelmed. He looked like he didn't know how to match up against big SEC ball. But towards the end there, especially in Tennessee where he had 20, he just kept getting better and better, kept getting more comfortable on the court. So glad to see that Jamari Thomas is proving where he belongs.
Another kind of area of struggle for the Gamecocks was the three-point shooting again. Both teams didn't shoot very well, both in the 20 to 25% range, but Carolina shot 15 more threes, so that percentage looks a lot worse for them. But I mean, Tennessee is a great team in general. They're a 2 seed in this year's tournament. I didn't have high expectations going into this matchup. Chaz Lanier is incredible as always, proves why he's one of the better two-way players in the country. 23 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and 3 steals. Game had his fingerprints all over it. I mean, even with Tennessee struggling from the line, they shot less than 50%. They still took home the victory against the Gamecocks. It was just another struggle from beyond the arc for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, we sound like a broken record every week trying to talk about what they should have done better, and it was so close the entire time yet again. Had the lead there in the second half by just a couple points. They were neck and neck with them. They just got cold there at the end.
Yeah. Well, as I was saying, Colin Murray Boyles had kind of a cold game, but going into that tournament game against Arkansas, he had a vintage Colin Murray Boyle performance with 20 points, 12 rebounds, and 3 stocks. Did foul out in the last minute, though. Yeah. Maybe the game could have been a little bit different had he stayed on the floor. But another great performance from Jamari Thomas as well. He had 16. He was just behind Murray Boyles, who had 20. Jacoby Wright, also another good game from him, 13 points. And I think it showed a lot of what the potential of this team was, because down 17 at the half, you're not really expecting much coming back into it. Lamont Paris must have had a Space Jam-inspired kind of pep talk at halftime, because they came back and they made it close, which was nice to see.
Yeah, Lamont Paris, he's had his hands full this year with all the tough opponents. Obviously, 95% or whatever it was in the SEC, the only 2 not being us, or South Carolina and LSU. But the Razorbacks were on a mission. They were looking to get revenge on the Gamecocks for the bad loss they took a few weeks prior. It was a heck of a comeback for the Gamecocks, and they rallied and fought hard, so that was good to see. But like you said, Thomas and CMB, those were the guys I wanted to highlight again. I think CMB was putting it all on the line because he knew that was like his last game.
Yeah, and Arkansas, this season at least, a very injured team. They only ran a 7-man rotation, but had real impact off the bench. I think both players on the bench for them were in the double digits. So they're a team that's heating up and is starting to look a little bit scary going into the tournament because, of course, their star guard Boogie Fland is coming back. So they could cause some upsets in March Madness. Trevon Brazile, the standout performer in that SEC matchup against South Carolina with 16 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists. But we'll travel over to the other side of the court. South Carolina women's basketball brought home their 3rd consecutive and 9th overall SEC tournament title after taking down Texas on March 9th. The Gamecocks secured their spot in the championship game with wins over Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. Despite a loss to the Longhorns in the regular season, the Gamecocks were never seriously threatened by them in the championship game. They took control early and led by 17 at the end of the second quarter. Texas attempted to stifle the South Carolina momentum with multiple timeouts, but they were never successful. The Gamecocks blew open the game in the 4th quarter, leading by 21 and finishing the game by 19. The Gamecocks will now put on their dancing shoes as they step into March Madness. On Sunday, the Gamecocks secured a #1 seed for the NCAA tournament, and they will begin their tournament this Friday at Colonial Life Arena against 16 seed Tennessee Tech.
Well, I'll let you catch your breath there. They looked great in the SEC tournament. They never had a close game at all, even against Texas, which they suffered a loss there right before the SEC tournament play, I should say. It was nice to beat Texas and prove that they did deserve that #1 seed. It was decided by a coin flip, like we've talked about.
Don't get me started about that.
Zander was expressive of his thoughts last around the horseshoe, but Chloe Kitts played well all tournament, had the
MVP?
SEC tournament MVP up. It was well-deserved, alongside Joyce Edwards, who we always talk about is phenomenal to watch. Continued playing well, and everything I gave the team crap for during the season, they cleaned up, they got a lot better, and they looked really good in the SEC tournament. They're getting hot at the right time.
Absolutely, and something I want to highlight, we talked about the bigs, it seems like every week this season of Gamecock Game Day. The 2 standout performers for me were Chloe Kitts and Sanaya Fagan, our bigs, who led scoring, had 9 rebounds and 6 rebounds, respectively. Each had 3 assists. Something that we were talking about all year is how are they going to keep up in the paint. They more than doubled the points in the paint that Texas had. The Gamecocks 40 and the Longhorns only 18. The only thing you could say about the performance that didn't go their way was the 3-point shooting again. Shot about 22% from beyond the arc. But from the beginning, Texas just looked like they were struggling. Madison Booker, who I think is their best player. If you look at the stat sheet, she had 10 points, 10 rebound, double-double, but she shot 4 from 13 from the field, so it felt like there was a lid on the rim, especially in that second quarter as they only scored 6. Yeah,
I want to talk about that 3-point percentage you just brought up, because that is one of the things I harped on all season long. But it shows that it doesn't matter. If you play great defense like they did and the bigs play well, you get it inside, you don't need the 3-point ball as much. Earlier in the season, I felt like that's kind of what they were resorting to when anything would go wrong. So the fact that they've cleaned up things around it takes away the pressure of shooting from beyond the arc. Absolutely, and
So another note that I have here, Austin, is just domination in the tournament as well. It was a 21-point victory in the first game they played, and then 18, and then 19. It's incredible to see how they've surged at this end of the season, because they aren't used to losing as many games as they did this season. But something else I want to highlight is that both teams had similar turnover numbers and rebounding numbers. So it was really just an amazing defensive effort from the Gamecocks to get this one done and to win pretty handily as well.
Absolutely.
Coming up after the break, Austin and I will join this week's guest for a trip around the horseshoe. Stay with us.
Get ready to meet the cast of Carolina Tonight. He's the above-average letterbox patron. It's Jamie Bass. She would rather be anywhere else. It's Chloe Brown. They come in to find no one at the surprise party. It's Harry Burgess. His OnlyFans is mostly clips from him on the show. It's Samuel Kander. She's been caught red-handed. It's Ishveen Gujral. He's slaying the house down. It's Will Gunter. She wants something that she wants. It's Liv Moody. He got kicked out of Harvard for anger issues. It's James Nolan. He completely blew this take. It's Tyler Perrone. He's verbally berating the customer service line. It's Billy Petty. He's wittily gwittying onto the stage. It's Jacob Perdue. She's here to tell you, beat it, nerd. It's Fiona Schreier. Often mistaken for someone more famous, it's Camden Speck. He can't find his locker on the first day. It's Asher Thompson. The person in the audition they didn't tell you about, it's Olivia Wamai. He procrastinated editing this video. It's Jonathan E. Come watch Carolina Tonight in Russell Underground.
Confirmation hearing for the first African-American woman to be nominated for the Supreme Court is underway.
As strikes continue across the nation, how USC campus workers are coming together.
And later, our women's basketball team starts their journey in the NCAA tournament tomorrow.
I'll have the weather forecast for this week and more for you tonight on SGTV, Student News at 7.
Campus, local, and national news. Run by students, for students. Student.
Bananas. Say bananas.
Bananas.
Yeah! Yeah, that's what I do. No.
In this song, I got but if
Folie à deux?
Folie à deux.
I hate the French.
You know, it's a Wattpad fan fiction based off of Adam Driver. Adam Driver?
Yes!
Oh my goodness! Star Wars!
Coming up on Around the Horseshoe. Men's basketball declines a bid to the NIT. Does this decision help or hurt the Gamecocks after a season full of difficulties? Women's basketball gains a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Our panel discusses the biggest threat for the Gamecocks in the field of 68. And we revisit our takes and expectations on Gamecock softball as they tally their first SEC Series win against Georgia this past weekend. Welcome back, everyone, to Around the Horseshoe. We hope you all had a great spring break. You know the drill. Let's introduce our panel for this week. As always, we have Gamecock Gameday's very own Zander Collins and Austin McConnell. Our guest this week is SGTV sports reporter Pflugrath. Pflugi, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We're excited.
Good luck.
How are you guys feeling after break? Refreshed?
A little better.
Ready to go?
A little rusty, but I think my debating skills are
Feeling amazing.
false confidence. I love it.
All right, well, we'll see where the confidence goes as we go around the horseshoe. We'll begin with men's basketball postseason. Well, at least that's what we thought. With new rules regarding the selection process for the National Invitation Tournament, or NIT, the Gamecocks were one of 2 SEC teams guaranteed a spot in the tournament. Despite their less than great conference record, the Gamecocks were selected alongside LSU to attend the NIT as the top 2 SEC teams not selected to the NCAA tournament. This comes after Texas was selected to participate in the tournament, becoming the 14th team in the conference selected for the tourney. However, the Gamecocks decided to decline the invitation. In a social media post, they cited concerns with team attrition and injuries, while moving their focus to improvement in the next season. So, is this the right move for USC? Or is this a mistake from a team that did not have the best regular season? Also, do you all believe the reasons given as the reason for declining the invite? Pflugi, we'll start with you.
Yeah, Ryan, I got 2 quick things with this. First thing is just the modern college sports world we're in. It's centered around the transfer portal. It's centered around NIL as much as some people kind of don't like that. And so yeah, I think this NIT tournament, I think this is one of those random throwaway bowl games that all your players sit out of and they try to get healthy, whether they go to the draft or go to the transfer portal, or maybe hopefully stay in South Carolina and get a little bit of a paycheck. Other thing is, I also think it's an SEC pride thing. You know, all respect to the NIT, but you don't want to be the NIT team. You know,
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, you said a lot of points that I agree with. I'm fine with it. I think they would have done really well in this tournament, obviously. But teams like LSU, Indiana, they also declined. But it's because they play in these top conferences. You talked about pride. Like, you don't want to diddle-daddle in the NIT, which, you know, for me stands for the not in tournament. So when you're not making the big dance in March, it's really humbling, and it's really, you know, it's not much of a, like, I don't know. Like, I just, because I would love to see them win. Win something this year, Jesus. But, you know, I think, you know, if you're settling for the NIT, in my opinion, it's a failure of a season.
Yeah, and what you were saying, Pflugi, makes a lot of sense with that SEC pride. And some of the notable teams not choosing to participate, like West Virginia, Indiana, who were, let's be honest, we're snubbed from going to the actual tournament. But there are also a lot of great teams in that tournament, like UC Irvine, like George Mason, who could have very well been in that last four kind of group of people. And I think that it's the wrong move for South Carolina, Ryan, because I think that at the end of the day, even if it's a pride thing, you want to show that you can compete. And there are very good programs in the NIT. And you want to show that you can compete against these kind of teams, especially after a season like South Carolina has had, where they did not do too hot. And to say they were invited to the tournament is kind of just not true at all, because there were only two teams in the SEC that didn't go. So I think when it comes to, like you said, this new era of college sports and recruiting and stuff like that, you have to show that you can compete, so you can try to get some of these guys who are maybe on the fence about recruiting and stuff like that. So I think while it makes sense why they didn't do it, I think it was the wrong move.
I did not expect quite the level of animosity for the NIT there, but yeah, Zander, I really agree with your points on this. I really think this was obviously not the season that Lamont Paris and Gamecock men's basketball fans hoped for this team, but I still, you know, think they're craving just like a little bit of, if anything, hope for the next season. And I think, you know, giving your team one last shot, some sort of postseason appearance to where they can match up with some of these good teams outside of the SEC, like George Mason, and a lot of the other teams that you mentioned that are coming into the NIT. Yeah, I just think that the fans for Gamecock men's basketball really just want to see more out of this team, just for the fact of having hope for next season. And to go off on that, I'm not really buying the attrition on the injuries point of view. I think we saw in the SEC tournament, we've seen, you know, the players that have been playing. Obviously, there's the injury issues we've been dealing with all season, but our team looks healthy from a standpoint. I didn't notice any major concerns with attrition, unless that's been something that's been going on all season and hasn't been something shared by Lamont Paris publicly until this point. But I just don't really buy the reasoning behind them declining it, other than this is not the season we wanted. We got to focus on things for next season, which is all well and good, but I think from a fan base perspective, you maybe want to see more of that. So, Zander, I'm going to give you the 2 points for this topic. Austin, I'm going to give you the one just because I like what you said about settling kind of justifies the failure for this team, settling for a lesser tournament, a lesser kind of postseason. I do kind of see where you're going from there. So, 2 points for Zander, 1 for Austin. We will move on to our next topic.
Back to business.
The other side of the court has seen some great success for Carolina, as expected. After a 27-3 regular season and wins over Vandy, Oklahoma, and revenge against Texas, leading to another SEC title, the Gamecocks were named a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Of course, the job's not finished for USC as they look to defend their national title from a year ago. They'll start with a game against OVC champion Tennessee Tech, and will then face either Utah or Indiana in the second round. If they continue to advance, they'll move on to Birmingham, where they'll likely face off with second-seeded Duke, third-seeded UNC, and or fourth-seeded Maryland. Looking at the teams who beat Carolina this season, number 1 overall seeded UCLA is in the Spokane 1 region, while UConn is the 2 seed in the Spokane 4 region, With Carolina being in the Birmingham 2 region, they won't face off until the Natty, if it comes down to that. However, Texas, the 1 seed in the Birmingham 3 region, is a likely Final Four matchup for SC if all goes as planned. So, who poses the biggest threat for the Gamecocks, and how far can Carolina go without facing a major challenge? Austin, your thoughts?
I think whoever wins the Utah-Indiana matchup is going to give the Gamecocks a tight game. But other than that, I'm going to make a bold claim that I don't see why they shouldn't make the Final Four. Looking at their region and looking at their bracket, I'm not really scared of anybody for them. Alabama doesn't scare me. UNC doesn't really scare me. If they run into Duke in the Elite Eight, that could be an issue. That would be a good matchup. But I think the Gamecocks should make a hefty run, and I would be disappointed if they don't at least make it to the Final Four.
Yeah, I agree with what you said about Duke. I think that's the biggest issue in their quarter of the bracket. But really, out of the 64 teams left in this tournament, there's one team that's going to be South Carolina's biggest challenge. They wear garnet and black, and it's themselves. To live up to their own standard. If South Carolina wins this, they would be the first team to go back-to-back since 2016 UConn. That featured Breanna Stewart, who's going to the Hall of Fame. I think South Carolina's own pressure is their biggest challenge. Duke's a good team. UCLA, U of SC out there in California. All those teams. They're respectable teams. But South Carolina's biggest challenge is themselves.
I really like that. And
That's
I'm
a bar.
actually really mad I didn't think of that. But, the 2 seed in our region is Duke. We already played them this season, won by double digits. So I'm really not concerned with anybody in our region. But I think the real challenge begins in the Final Four. But is that really even a challenge if they face Texas? Because we've seen how they were able to beat them twice already this season. Obviously, Texas did hand South Carolina a loss in the SEC this season. But after that most recent matchup against them, I'm not as concerned because, as Austin and I were talking about in the first segment, the things that we were concerned about earlier in the season are starting to fix themselves. They're starting to play more down low. They're starting to shoot less from beyond the arc because the percentages haven't been super great. The bigs are playing well. They're defending well. They're distributing well. And I think all of us can agree that bigs are a huge part of the women's college basketball game. So I think there's not really a challenge for them until the Final Four, maybe even the final.
Well, I think we can all collectively agree that this sport has gone well beyond what it was last year in terms of the level of talent that all of these top teams have. I mean, we went into last season, South Carolina going undefeated, pretty clear shot of going to the championship and winning it, which they did end up doing. But now it's a little bit more blurry, I think, in the waters. You have teams like UCLA, Texas, UConn, who have already proven they can beat the Gamecocks as they have this season. And you also have teams like USC and Notre Dame who are itching for a chance to, get to the highest level. So I really think there is a lot of pressure on this team to go back-to-back, something that, as Pflugi mentioned, hasn't been done since 2016. And Pflugi, I am going to give you the 2 points on this just because I think it is a lot. It's a lot of pressure for this team. And it's a lot of players who have been to the tournament before but have not necessarily handled as much of the pressure as they'll have a load on this year. So, Pflugi, I'm going to give you the 2 points. Austin, I am going to give you the 1 on this also. Make it all tied up. I like your insight going into not overlooking Utah and Indiana. You always say, don't overlook the teams, coming right in front of the Gamecocks. And Utah, whoever wins out of that Utah-Indiana game, hopefully will beat Tennessee Tech. I'm not too concerned about that. But USC will beat Tennessee Tech. Not too concerned about that. But if we get to the second round and face that Utah-Indiana matchup, they are 2 very tough teams, despite their seeding being in the 8th, 9th region of our region. So it's the Gamecocks just need to look right ahead of them and really focus on going round by round and breaking through this tournament. And so that will give Austin the 1 point for that. We are all tied up at 2 apiece again, just like last week, heading into the last topic here. Let's go over to the Diamond. After falling in all 3 games in Norman and stumbling over a midweek game versus Coastal Carolina, Gamecock softball looks to be back on track after getting a series win over Georgia. After falling 4-7 in the first game of the series, fans maybe thought that the slump for Carolina would continue into their first SEC home series. But the Gamecocks bounced back in an 8-inning walk-off win on Saturday to even out the series. On Sunday, 2 solo shots from Georgia would put them in the lead early. However, during a brief break for Bulldog pitcher Randy Rolling, Carolina was able to load the bases and bring in 3 runs in the bottom of the 5th. Afterwards, pitcher Sam Gress, who pitched 7 innings on Saturday's game, proved her longevity by being able to close out the game in 4 2/3 innings with 3 hits and 5 strikeouts, giving USC their first SEC series win this season. So, let's take some time to reevaluate our thoughts on this team, except for Zander, who is apparently a time traveler and knew this team was going to do well from the beginning. And look at some new expectations for this team. Now, they'll take a break from SEC play this weekend, although not really a break because they'll face the 12th-ranked Texas Tech Red Raiders before going on the road to 4th-ranked LSU the weekend after. They also have Arkansas, Ole Miss, Auburn, and Alabama on the docket, all teams currently ranked in the top 25. So what is the new ceiling for the Gamecocks, and how far should we could we be looking rather, in terms of postseason play? Xander, let's start with you.
Man, I am smiling ear to ear because that really made my day, Ryan. Because
Don't try and butter
I have to
me
give
that
you
last point.
that was funny, was it not?
Yeah, it was good. Good.
Okay, so
Start yapping, bro.
I had to give you some justification for the take because I didn't, give you any
I
points
take
when
apologies
we talked about it
in
the first
the mail, verbally, it's whenever you can get to it. Because of those players, like you mentioned, Sam Gress, and then the coaching prowess, specifically pitching coaching prowess of Chastain Woodard, I was very high on this team. And I mean, obviously, it didn't go their way against Oklahoma, but they lost the series by 3 runs in total, which is, I don't know if you guys know this, but it's the lowest possible total you can lose a series by. So I think that while I had super high expectations for them against Oklahoma for what actually happened, I'm not going to back down on anything that I've said because I think this team is very talented, and I think that they've hit the portal in a great way. And obviously they did have that 5-game losing streak, but that's something that we expected to happen a lot earlier than it did. For these woes to just kind of start happening now later in the season is a lot later than I had thought, and there's still a lot of time after that as well. And they showed it by coming out and having a great series against Georgia. So I think that my expectations are remaining the same, Ryan, as I think that when tournament time comes around, I think they can make it out of their region and maybe, give some of those other high-ranked teams a game, because the national championship last year, Texas lost each of those games by more than South Carolina lost in total. So those are the 2 best programs in the nation, and South Carolina is showing that they can stick it to the giants of college softball in their conference as well. So I think that there's a lot of success in their future. How much, I think, maybe getting out of the region and trying to wreck things from there.
Yeah, I think, you touched on it. The Oklahoma series sucked because of that statistic. And then they scared me with that midweek loss to Coastal Carolina. I was kind of thinking that's when the wheels were going to start falling off. I got a little nervous. But then they had that Georgia series where they lost the first game. So that's why I was like, all right, we're done here. But they rebounded. They weren't. The narrator voice came in. Yeah, no, they looked good. They won the series against Georgia. Another thing I need them to tighten up is their full gameplay before we really start getting into postseason talk. They've had to come from behind in so many of these games, and that's not always going to work.
But did they do it?
Not against Oklahoma.
But the other one.
A couple times, but every now and then, it's like when we play these good teams, they're not going to let up 7 runs in the 7th inning like we've had to do a couple times. I just need them to play a full 7 innings. Sam Gress obviously has that consistency throughout the entire game, that longevity. That was really refreshing to see, but I just need that out of the whole team. So my expectations also remain the same, a little more positive than what it was at the beginning of the season. I'm still... I want to make sure they know what they're doing.
When are you going to buy in? I bought when the tickets were cheap. They're at their highest price right now.
Yeah, well, Yeah, that's a good point. But my expectations have definitely raised a little bit. They're not as skeptical as they were.
I'll allow it.
Just keep finding ways to win. Play a full 7-inning game every day. Get a good spot in the tournament, and like you said, make it out of the region.
Yeah, I agree. It's similar expectations, but I'd like to take a moment to just put it into perspective. We're really excited about this softball team right now. They've had some exciting wins against some big teams, some discouraging losses against some #1 ranked teams. Last year, they were 21-6 at this point in the season. We're 22-5 right now.
It's progress.
It's progress, but it's about the same spot we are. So I really want to buy the stock. I really want to buy the stock. I think it's going to rise. I think as far as what Ryan's saying, how far we can look into postseason, you just got to take it one thing at a time. They got a very interesting series against Texas Tech coming up starting Friday, and they have another very interesting series in Baton Rouge against #3 LSU. I think after those two series, we're really going to see if this team is looking at a national championship, if we're looking to compete in the SEC championship. And I don't think there's any reason why they shouldn't, like you said.
Why not them?
Only lost by 3 runs over 3 games to the #1 team. They can compete, but it's just one step at a time for South Carolina softball.
And if you guys want to watch that
I was about to
Texas Tech series, we're all going to be on the broadcast this weekend, so tune in.
It's going to be a good one.
SGTV.
It's going to be a good one.
Yeah. Well,
it's the score prediction time, Travis.
Pflugi, I'm interested in what you said with the kind of comparison of the first half of last season and the first half of this season, because at this point in the season, we're just getting into SEC play. And that's what really matters for South Carolina. I mean, when the Gamecocks start these tournaments, start these seasons, they're playing in tournaments that are at home and are typically against some pretty easy opponents. Not always easy. We had, UVA at the very start of the season this year, who's now a ranked opponent, and then, after our 3 tournaments, going on the road to Duke in a hostile environment, it's definitely a step up. It definitely shows a step up, I think, from what this program has been in the past. So I feel like what really matters for this team heading into the rest of the season is put what all you've done in the start of the season behind you. You had a great start, stumbled over a few games, now you're back on track with this SEC win. What the series, I think, that's really going to point out how well this team can do. I know we've already talked about them going to Oklahoma, having 3 close games. That's great. I'm looking at that LSU series in a couple of weeks on the road in Baton Rouge against the LSU currently 4th. I believe in some polls they're ranked 3rd, jumping Florida. So one of the top 4 highest echelon teams in the SEC, which is by far the greatest softball conference in the nation.
Ever.
I think when you go on the road to that hostile environment, obviously they've gone to Duke. That's all well and good. They have a very good team at Duke. I'm looking for how this team responds in a hostile SEC environment against a hostile fan base and having a team at that highest echelon. I think that's really going to be the area that shows how well this team can do and how far this team can go. So I think you'd really have to take it one game at a time. And so Pflugi is going to get the 2 points for this game. Just put everything in front of you. You've had a great start, but that's all behind you right now. You just got to keep going. You just got to put one foot in front of the other and keep muscling through this SEC series that's going to keep on wearing you down. And Austin, I'm going to give you the 1 for this, so you'll come in 2nd place for this week, just because they do have to play a full 7 innings. And that, if there is one issue that has come out of this team so far that I could qualify as glaring, which it's not really a glaring issue because they've been managing, the Gamecocks have been managing to win still despite this. It's, they come in, they don't score up until 5-6 innings, and then, bottom of the 6th, they rattle off 8 runs. Like, you can't do that against every single opponent, and especially not in the SEC, because they have such pitching depth that when their team starts to get on the roll, boom, they have another ace up their sleeve that they can immediately bring in the circle to shut that down. So you can't rely on these big have innings where you put all of your runs in the game. You have to play a full and consistent 7 innings at bat. So Austin with the 1 point. Pflugi is our winner this week with 4 total points.
Thank you. Thank you.
Pflugi, thanks for joining us this week. It's great
you.
to have you. You'll see him very soon on Friday. So
Hear him?
looking
Yeah.
forward to him. Or hearing him. Yeah. Well, we're on camera.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Yeah.
Looking really forward to those broadcasts. Dakota and I were able to do the Georgia broadcast last Sunday, and that was an amazing experience. A great game to go to.
Phenomenal
Really
call.
excited for this series between Texas Tech. Not a lot of people realize how good the Red Raiders are at softball, but it's going to
They can
be.
play.
Gamecocks are ranked 10th or 11th, depending on what poll you look at. Texas Tech's ranked pretty much 12th across the board, so should be a pretty even matchup and a really fun one to watch at Carolina Softball Stadium. So with that, thank you so much, Pflugi, for coming on. We'll be back next week, and there's more Gamecock Game Day coming to you right after this.
Get ready to meet the cast of Carolina Tonight. He's the above-average letterbox patron. It's Jamie Bass. She would rather be anywhere else. It's Chloe Brown. They come in to find no one at the surprise party. It's Harry Burgess. His OnlyFans is mostly clips from him on the show. It's Samuel Kander. She's been caught red-handed. It's Ishveen Gudral. He's slaying the house down. It's Will Gunter. She wants something that she wants. It's Liv Moody. He got kicked out of Harvard for anger issues. It's James Nolan. He completely blew this take. It's Tyler Peroni. He's verbally berating the customer service line. It's Billy Petty. He's wittily gwittying onto the stage. It's Jacob Perdue. She's here to tell you, beat it, nerd. It's Fiona Schreier. Often mistaken for someone more famous, it's Camden Speck. He can't find his locker on the first day. It's Asher Thompson. The person in the audition they didn't tell you about, it's Olivia Wamai. He procrastinated editing this video. It's Jonathan E. Come watch Carolina Tonight in Russell Underground.
I'm here at Williams-Brice Stadium.
I'm here at Stone Stadium.
I'm here at the Carolina Volleyball Center.
I'm here at Blatt Aquatic Center.
Let's check out some of the highlights.
Welcome back, Gamecocks.
As we have mentioned in Around the Horseshoe, the men's basketball season has ended after they declined to play in the National Invitation Tournament.
For women's basketball, Utah and Indiana will tip off the NCAA tournament in Columbia this Friday at 1:30. The Gamecocks will take the court right after at 4 o'clock to face off with Tennessee Tech. The winner of each game will meet back on the court on Sunday.
Yeah, so, we can talk about men's basketball real quick. I think this is going to go by very quickly. We talked in Around the Horseshoe about the opt-out. I'm fine with it. Just get the season over with. Focus on the off season. Hit the transfer portal, like Pflugi was talking about. And we were both talking about as well. Like we all kind of agreed that it was a letdown to settle for the NIT. So just try and bring in a couple guys, get into off season, get healthy if that is truly what the issue is. I'm excited to see what Lamont Paris does to turn the team around. So hopefully we don't go 2-16 in conference play next year.
It's just interesting to me that they would decline an invite when they didn't seem like a team that would make the NIT if there weren't guaranteed spots for SEC, because they just genuinely had such a terrible second half of the season. And like you were saying, Austin, it's just disappointing that you don't want to go out there and compete, give fans more time with Colin Murray Boyles, who's most definitely probably not returning. So I mean, I guess that makes sense if Lamont Paris wants to keep him healthy, so his draft stock is as high as possible, especially after that performance against Arkansas where he had a very great game. But just overall disappointing not to, actually kind of torn because do we want to see more of that or did we not? So, but I think you just do want to go to and compete because I think if you decline it, it's kind of saying that you don't belong there, or like because at this point they weren't too good for the NIT tournament.
Yeah.
So.
And now here's a team with a lot more basketball left to play, hopefully.
Yes.
Tennessee Tech is coming to Columbia to take on the Gamecocks. They are 26-5 overall, but their 5 losses came on the road. They won the Ohio Valley Conference, so they know how to win, but it's David versus Goliath on Friday.
Yeah.
It's going to be exciting to see how the Gamecocks skate through this one. I'm interested in their second round matchup, and I mentioned it briefly in Around the Horseshoe. Utah or Indiana? Utah has a ranked win over Notre Dame, but nothing really besides that. So on paper, that win looks good as Notre Dame was ranked number 3 at the time earlier in the season. But other than that, they don't really have anything, whereas Indiana, they have a bit better of a resume. They have a lot more ranked wins, have played a lot tougher opponents. Got to get through Utah, but I think if the Gamecocks end up playing Indiana, we're going to see a good matchup, I think.
I'm not as worried about it as you, Austin, and I'm definitely not worried about Tennessee Tech because in the history of the women's tournament, a 16 seed being a 1 seed has only happened once, and that was 26 years ago. Gamecocks are not a team that will ever lose to a 16 seed. So I don't have very many notes on that because I think it's not going to be very close at all. Dakota and I will be reporting on that one for SGTV, so make sure to...
Busy weekend ahead of you.
Yeah, make sure to look out for that one. But, I mean, like you said, they hopefully have a lot more basketball to play, and I think that will be the reality because, like Ryan said, I am time traveling. So I just came back from the Final Four. We did take home the championship, so come back to this video after that. It's against UCLA, too, by the way.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little revenge tour.
If they're not on the same side, because then that would be...
I think we would match up against UCLA
in the final.
In the championship, yes.
Okay. And Chloe Kitts has another monster performance, so you'll really love it when you guys get to watch it in real time. But
yeah,
but yeah, I'm not really worried about any of these first couple rounds of matchups because this team is on a roll and fixing things that they had problems with earlier in the season. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We just talked about it all show. They've really cleaned up everything they needed to clean up, and you mentioned it again in Around the Horseshoe that the 3-point shooting has dropped a little bit because we're not resorting to it. We're not needing.
We don't need to.
Yeah, we don't need to when we're
get
getting
the ball
bigs
down low
inside.
and they distribute it, they score it.
Exactly. As long as we
it's starting to look a lot better.
As long as we do that, we're gonna go toe to toe with anybody in the country, and I think I don't want to get too overexcited like you do, but I am excited. I really am. I'm a firm believer in don't overlook anybody except Tennessee Tech. We don't need them, but genuinely it's postseason play. It's one and done. Like you have to win out from here. So you can't fall asleep in the first quarter like they tend to sometimes. They just gotta keep the ball rolling.
True. And that wraps up our show for tonight. Thank you guys for tuning in to Gamecock Game Day.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram, X, and YouTube at SGTV at USC. To keep up with all of our content, be sure to also visit us online at sgtv at usc.com. I'm Austin McConnell.
And I'm Zander Collins. From all of us here at SGTV, have a great night, Carolina. Forever to thee.